Get out of this house if you can't respect my husband." The words cut through what should have been a warm birthday dinner in the candle-lit, 2-story wooden house, filled with the smell of apple pie. A silver spoon clattered onto a plate, shattering the illusion of peace. Evelyn Hart froze her hand suspended in mid-air while the wine glass in her daughter's hand trembled, spilling red across the edge of the table and seeping into the white lace cloth. In that instant, Evelyn knew something inside her had died. Clara, the only daughter she had raised with blood and tears, sat opposite her eyes, red but resolute. Beside her, Ethan, the young husband, held his wife's hand tightly, his expression tinged with triumph. At the head of the table, Ethan's mother, Ruth, lifted her chin and spoke in a voice soft but venomous. "Don't blame her, Evelyn. She just wants to keep the peace. We all know this house belongs to everyone now, don't we?" She lingered on the words to everyone with a faint smile. Evelyn clenched her fist to hide the trembling. Around the table, Ethan and Ruth's friends pretended to chat, but their eyes flicked toward the scene as if watching a fine play. She looked around the room that had once been the heart of her home, the cream-colored walls she had painted herself, the oak table her husband Jonathan had built with his own hands, the curtains Clara had chosen at 12. Now they looked like exhibits in someone else's house. To everyone, Evelyn repeated her voice hoarse like a dulled blade. "Ruth, this house was built by Jonathan and me, with our own hands, every brick, every wall. It's not everyone's." Ethan sighed and set down his glass. "Mom, we don't mean any disrespect, but we pay the bills, maintain the garden, fix the roof. I think it's time everyone in the house has an equal say." Clara tugged at his sleeve, forcing a polite smile. "Mom, I just want everyone to be comfortable. His parents are struggling. They have nowhere to stay. I can't abandon them." Evelyn looked straight into her daughter's eyes, the same eyes she once saw in the mirror of her youth, and in that moment she felt a vast, icy distance between them. Comfortable means sending me away. Silence. Then Ruth rose, circled behind Clara, and rested a hand on her shoulder. "No one is sending anyone away. It's just that sometimes older people need rest. Maybe this place isn't suitable for you anymore." Her tone was gentle, almost lulling. Evelyn gave a faint, bitter smile. "Suitable. I've just returned from taking care of a sick friend for a week. I come home and find a stranger sleeping in my bed using my dishes, and now you tell me I don't belong here." Ruth's brow furrowed slightly, but she kept her calm demeanor. "We were only helping to tidy things up." Evelyn stood the scrape of the chair on the floor, slicing through the silence. "Clara," she said slowly, "do you remember who sold her wedding ring to pay your college tuition?" Clara lowered her head, tears glistening. "I know, Mom, but Evelyn cut her off. Who stayed by your side for 3 months after you lost your baby? Who kept this house when your father died when the bank came to collect the debt?" Ethan gripped Clara's hand, his face tense. "Enough, Mom. Stop using the past to control our lives. You have to understand times have changed. Times have changed." The 3 words struck like a slap. Evelyn felt the blood in her veins turn cold. Ruth smiled and poured more wine. "Evelyn, let's not ruin dinner. We're just talking practical matters. If you feel uncomfortable, maybe take a few days away to clear your mind. I hear there's a lovely little inn in Maple Hollow." The lightness of her tone chilled the entire room. Ethan said nothing, staring down at his plate. Clara broke into sobs, but no protest came from her lips. Evelyn looked at her daughter, realizing that the girl who once promised to protect her now sat silently while others decided her fate. She turned and walked slowly down the hallway, each step a cut to the heart. On the wall hung a photo of 10-year-old Clara, laughing beside Jonathan. Evelyn reached out to touch the frame, the cold seeping into her fingertips. Outside, the wind howled through the window, rustling the new curtains Ruth had hung. At the end of the hallway, she stopped and looked back one last time. The warm light cast over the faces of those she once called family. No one spoke. No one stood. Evelyn lifted her suitcase, still packed from her recent trip, and walked to the door. Her steps were steady, though inside her chest, her heart was breaking. On the porch, the cold air carried the faint scent of apple blossoms. Evelyn drew a deep breath and closed her eyes. She remembered Jonathan's voice. "This house is for you, for Clara. No one can ever take it from you." He had kept that promise, and the thought, though painful, made her smile. Because they were wrong. She was not the weak woman being driven out of her own home. She was the true owner, the one who had quietly placed the entire property under her name after Jonathan's death. Clara didn't know, and Ruth even less. And tonight, as rain began to fall, Evelyn understood that it was time they remembered who really held the keys. She pulled her suitcase down the steps and walked into the night. Behind her, the music still played. The laughter continued as if nothing had happened. But ahead, the wet road shimmered with the reflection of streetlights like new promises. Evelyn didn't cry, didn't shout. She only tightened her grip on the handle and whispered to herself, "All right, my children, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. But I will come back." A bolt of lightning tore across the dark sky, illuminating the face of a woman freshly betrayed, and in that flash her eyes were no longer soft. They gleamed cold and deep, as if a silent fire had awakened within her, the fire of a mother pushed to her limits, ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Rain poured all night, as if washing away everything Evelyn had held inside during that dinner. She drove in silence, her frozen fingers gripping the steering wheel. The road to Maple Hollow was familiar, yet tonight it seemed endless. When her car stopped in front of the small inn by the woods, the clock had already passed 11. The wooden house glowed faintly with warm yellow light. Evelyn stepped to the counter, checked in, and slowly climbed the stairs, carrying her suitcase and a suffocating emptiness. In the small room with pale blue walls and crisp white sheets, she sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched tightly. The musty air mixed with artificial lavender made her stomach turn. In all her years, she had never imagined being driven out of the very place she had built with her own hands. That house wasn't just wood and bricks, it was a lifetime of memories. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. In her head still echoed Ruth's gentle, poisonous voice and her daughter's words. "I just want everyone to be comfortable." Comfortable. Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. For years she had lived so her daughter could be comfortable, so Clara would never lack anything, so her life could be smoother than her mother's. When Jonathan died, Evelyn worked 12-hour days and taught classes at night just to keep her daughter from having to take loans. She once believed that as long as her daughter was happy, she could endure anything. But now the happiness her daughter spoke of had become the very knife that cut into her. A clap of thunder broke outside the window. Evelyn shivered. On the table, her phone vibrated. A call from a familiar number, David Carter, her late husband's old lawyer. She hesitated, then answered. "Evelyn, I heard you're back in town. Is everything all right?" David's voice was deep and steady, as if he already sensed something was wrong. Evelyn took a long breath. "David, I need your help. I need a legal eviction notice. They have to leave my house." Silence lingered on the other end. They, my daughter and her husband's family. The words caught in her throat. Evelyn heard David sigh. "Are you sure this won't be simple? It could cause a scandal. I've lost too much already, David. Reputation doesn't matter anymore. I just want my home back." Her voice was dry but firm. "All right, I'll prepare the papers. I'll stop by in the morning." Evelyn nodded, then hung up. In the quiet room, she sat motionless, listening to the rain pounding on the tin roof like the sound of her heart breaking. The pain inside her was no longer sharp, but hollow and cold. She opened her suitcase and took out an old photo frame, one of the three of them on the day their home was completed, Jonathan, Clara, and her standing on the newly built porch, sunlight glinting through the apple trees behind them. Jonathan had said, "If I'm ever gone, you'll still have this place. This house is yours forever." Evelyn smiled through her tears. He had been right. The deed still carried her name. Jonathan had transferred everything before he passed. Only she knew that. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window watching the rain pour down through the trees. Dawn crept in, slowly the droplets on the glass shimmering in the morning light like fragments of memory. When the knock came at her door, she was ready. David stood there, raincoat soaked, holding a folder in his hands. "Are you sure?" he asked once more as they sat down. Evelyn nodded. More than ever. David opened the file, his voice calm and measured. "I've prepared the eviction notice. They have 24 hours to leave. If not, we'll take it to court." Evelyn signed her name, each stroke of the pen firm and final, severing the last thread of her old life. After David left, Evelyn put on her coat and stepped outside. The road glistened after the rain, the air rich with the scent of wet earth and leaves. She walked to the cafe at the end of the street, the same one where she and Jonathan used to sit every Sunday. The young waitress recognized her and smiled brightly. "It's been so long, Miss Evelyn." The usual black coffee. Evelyn nodded, a faint warmth rising in her chest. Some people still remembered, still saw her as herself, not as the mother replaced in her own home. As she sat by the window, she saw an older woman waving Martha Green, her old neighbor. Evelyn went over. "Evelyn, I heard what happened. The whole town is talking. Are you all right?" Evelyn forced a small smile. "Better than I expected. Maybe sometimes betrayal is what it takes to wake up." Martha took her hand, eyes filled with sympathy. "You're not alone. Everyone in Maple Hollow knows who built that house. Jonathan poured every inch of its foundation himself. People will stand with you." Evelyn thanked her and left the cafe. As she walked down the small street, she passed a group of students laughing together. A young woman around 20 recognized her and gave a small bow. "Ms. Hart. You taught me to read back in 2nd grade." Evelyn smiled. "And what are you doing now? I'm a reporter for the town paper. If you ever need help, just let me know." Evelyn nodded, a strange warmth blooming inside her. After all these years of living quietly, she realized she had touched more lives than she ever knew. That afternoon, back in her room, her phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. Ethan's cold voice filled the line. "What are you doing, Mother? What papers did David bring this morning? Are you trying to humiliate us?" Evelyn spoke calmly. "No one's humiliating anyone. I'm just reclaiming what's mine." Ethan scoffed. "Yours. We have rights too." "Clara's crying. Can't you see you're destroying this family?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "A family isn't destroyed by a piece of paper, Ethan. It's destroyed when people forget who built it." Then she hung up. By afternoon, the clouds began to part and soft sunlight streamed through the window. Evelyn took out her old notebook and wrote a few lines. It's time. Not for revenge, but to remind them of the value of gratitude. When night fell, she packed her things into her suitcase once more. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, she would return, not to beg, but to reclaim. Outside, the wind was rising the trees along the road, knocking against one another like drums announcing the start of a battle. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from lack of sleep, yet deep inside them burned unwavering resolve. She whispered to her reflection, "Tomorrow they'll see. I'm not just an old mother. I'm the one who holds the key, and I'll open that door in my own way. Outside, a storm began to form. Inside Evelyn, another storm was already waiting. Dawn spread softly over the Maple Hollow Valley. The pale light slid through misty branches, illuminating every dewdrop like glass. Evelyn had been up since early morning, dressed in a gray wool sweater buttoned up to her neck. She skipped her usual morning coffee and drank only water. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from anticipation. When the knock came at the door, she knew David had arrived. He carried a large yellow envelope, his face solemn. "Ready?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "I've been ready since the moment they told me to leave." On the drive back, the car rolled past rows of apple trees, shedding their fruit. The scent of ripened apples filled the air, stirring memories of the years when Jonathan was still alive. He used to climb those trees, picking bright red apples to bake pies for Clara to take to her school fair. That peaceful life now existed only in memory. As the car turned down the narrow lane leading to the house, Evelyn saw a black SUV parked in front, the one belonging to Ruth. The upstairs window was wide open, the new curtains fluttering in the wind. The house was no longer a home, it was a battlefield. David stepped out first, cautious as if delivering a verdict. He knocked 3 firm times. The door opened and Ruth appeared in a pale pink silk robe. Her hair neatly pinned her face, painted as though she had just stepped out of a party. Behind her stood Ethan and Clara, both unkempt and still half asleep. The air was thick with tension. David handed over the envelope. "Mrs. Hart, the legal owner of this property, requests that you vacate the premises within 24 hours. His tone was calm and even yet sharp enough to split the silence in two. Ruth let out a cold laugh. More empty threats. "This house belongs to our family. Evelyn, stop this nonsense." Evelyn didn't answer. She looked straight at her daughter. "Clara, how long will you let others speak for you?" Clara trembled her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want peace. Peace doesn't come from silence in the face of injustice." Evelyn replied, her voice eerily calm. Ethan stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You're overreacting. You're putting Clara in an impossible position. Do you even know we just lost a contract, that we're in debt, and now you want to take away the roof over our heads? That's my house." Evelyn said, each word falling heavy and clear like a hammer. "And you, the people I once called family, chose to stand with someone else. Now face the consequences." David spoke next. "If you do not vacate before tomorrow morning, we'll file this with the court." Ruth slammed her hand on the table, her face flushing red. "You wouldn't dare." Evelyn stood firm, her gaze locked on her daughter. "I dare." She repeated it without trembling, without fear. The room fell silent. They signed the acknowledgement papers and David left. Before stepping out, Evelyn paused at the doorway. 24 hours. After that, I'll be back." She walked straight to the car without looking back. As the car rolled down the hill, the wind carried Ruth's shrill voice after her. "Crazy old woman, don't you ever set foot here again." But Evelyn simply closed her eyes and let the words fade away like the first chill of winter. By noon, the town was buzzing. News traveled faster than she had expected. In Maple Hollow, nothing stayed secret for long. When Evelyn stopped by the general store, the shopkeepers glanced at her with a mix of curiosity and admiration. "I heard you're suing your own daughter," a middle-aged woman asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I'm only taking back what's mine." Martha heard the news and came to the inn carrying a basket of fresh apples. "Evelyn, they're calling you the bravest woman in town. Everyone's on your side. If you need a place to stay, my house always has a spare room." Evelyn was touched and clasped her friend's hand. "Thank you, but all I need is for them to understand that silence is not weakness." That night she sat by the open window of her room watching the distant lights of her old house. In the dim glow, she saw Clara on the porch, holding her little daughter Lily, who was crying. Evelyn smiled softly. Though she had been cast out, her heart still softened at the sight of her grandchild. "My sweet girl," she whispered, "someday you'll understand. Sometimes you have to walk away to be respected." The next morning, when David returned, he held another stack of documents. "There's something new," he said gravely. "I just received a response from their side. They've hired a lawyer, and they're claiming the right to stay based on an agreement from 3 years ago." Evelyn frowned. "What agreement? A deed of property use signed by you?" She froze. "That's impossible." "I never signed anything like that." David laid the copy before her. Her familiar signature stared back from the page. Then she remembered 3 years ago Clara had asked her to sign some home insurance papers to lower taxes. That was when she had been deceived. The blood drained from her face. "They planned this," Evelyn whispered. "Step by step." David nodded. "If that's true, it's fraud. But we need proof. Do you have anyone who can testify?" Evelyn thought of her old neighbor Peter, the man who had helped Jonathan build the wall. He had witnessed the original property transfer. "I have someone," she said, her voice cold. That afternoon, Evelyn went to see Peter at his workshop. He looked older, his hands still covered in sawdust. "Of course I remember," he said after she explained. "You signed the paper that day. I even joked about your neat handwriting. But Clara never said it was a transfer deed. You trusted her." Who could have known? Evelyn sighed. "I don't blame anyone, but I have to make it right." Peter patted her shoulder. "Do it, Evelyn. Don't let them take what Jonathan left you." That night in her small room, Evelyn spread all the documents across the table. Each sheet was a piece of the past, now evidence for the present. She wrote down every event, every date, every witness preparing for the final battle. Every line she wrote was a cut into the blind trust she had once given Clara. When she reached the line 3 years ago, signed property tax papers, tears dropped onto the page, smudging the ink. She didn't wipe them away. Pain deserved to be seen, not hidden. Before dawn, the shrill ring of the phone broke the silence. Clara's name flashed on the screen. Evelyn hesitated, then answered. "Mom," her daughter's voice trembled, "do you really want to throw us out? I know I was wrong, but do you have to take it this far?" Evelyn sat quietly. "Do you remember who taught you that honesty is the foundation of everything?" "Mom, I just did what they told me. I thought you'd understand." "Understand?" Evelyn gave a sad laugh. "You want me to understand that I was deceived by the very child I raised, that you used my signature to turn your father's house into someone else's prize." On the other end, Clara began to cry. "I didn't know they'd go that far." "Mom, I'm sorry." Hearing her daughter's sobs, Evelyn's heart softened, but her voice remained steady. "You don't need to apologize, Clara, but you have to face the truth. Tomorrow I'm coming back and everyone will hear everything." She hung up and sighed. Her eyes drifted toward the window where the moonlight fell cold and silver. The battle wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid. Inside her, a quiet strength had begun to rise, the strength of a mother who had been pushed out of her own home, now ready to return, not to plead, but to reclaim her honor, her truth, and the daughter who had lost her way. The next morning, the sky was a dull gray, heavy clouds hanging low like an omen of the storm to come. Evelyn sat in the car beside David, her hands gripping the folder that contained the documents and the copy of the transfer deed. The road leading home was slick with morning mist, the tires hissing softly against the damp pavement. She said nothing the entire way, her gaze fixed on the window, where the trees on both sides drooped with wet leaves, bowing as if acknowledging her storm-bound return. David glanced at her. "You all right?" Evelyn answered quietly. "I've been fine ever since I realized they dared to turn my trust into a weapon." When the car stopped in front of the gate, Evelyn drew a deep breath. The iron gate had been repainted white with a new sign affixed that read, "The Collins Residence." A sharp, invisible blade pierced her chest. That sign was a declaration that she no longer belonged here. She pushed the gate open, the hinges creaking harshly. In the yard, Ruth was cutting flowers from the chrysanthemum bed near the porch, humming softly to herself. When she saw Evelyn, she froze, then smiled thinly. "Oh, you came back. I thought you got the message last time." "You misunderstood." Evelyn replied, her voice steady and cold as steel. "I came to finish this." David followed, placing the folder on the porch table. Ethan and Clara stepped outside, their little daughter Lily clutching the hem of her mother's dress, wide-eyed and frightened. Clara's eyes were swollen while Ethan tried to look composed, though his hand gripped the back of a chair too tightly. "Mom, please don't make this worse." "We can talk," he said. Evelyn looked at her daughter, her heart softening for a brief moment. But then the memory of the forged signature and the years of deceit returned. Talk. "What do you want to talk about?" "How you and they tricked me into signing away my own house." Ruth set down her basket of flowers and crossed her arms. "Stop playing the victim, Evelyn. You agreed to let them stay. You signed voluntarily. There's a signature notarized." "No one stole anything," David interjected, laying the copied documents on the table. "We have proof that Mrs. Hart was deceived into signing under false pretenses. This is intentional fraud, and if necessary, we'll have the court investigate." Ethan's face turned pale as he glanced at Ruth. "Mother, is that true?" Ruth looked away, forcing a calm expression. "Don't be naive, Ethan. It was just paperwork. Nobody cares about a few pieces of paper." Evelyn gave a cold smile. "I care because that is my home. You don't because you've only ever lived off the shadow of others." Ruth stepped forward, her voice rising. "You dare insult me in this house?" Evelyn shot back immediately. "My house!" The air froze. Clara burst into tears, pulling Lily into her arms. "Mom, I didn't mean to. I thought it was just a form for tax reduction. I didn't know Ruth had—" "You knew," Evelyn interrupted. "You just didn't want to see it. You let them lead you like a child, and now you can't even tell what's right anymore." Ethan slammed his hand on the table, spilling a glass of water across the surface. "Enough, we're family. Why do you have to turn everything into a war zone?" Evelyn turned to him, her voice low but heavy with force. "Because no one has the right to call themselves family while trampling the one who gave them life." Clara held her daughter close, tears falling onto Lily's hair. "Mom, please, not in front of her." Evelyn looked at her granddaughter, and the child's innocent eyes tightened something deep in her chest. "I don't want to," she said softly. "But sometimes someone has to stand up so this child will learn what respect means." David opened the folder, taking out a stack of photos and printed messages that Martha had helped gather. "Mrs. Ruth, these conversations are enough to prove a deliberate scheme to seize property. We have both witnesses and originals." Ruth's face turned pale, her forced smile faltering. "Just gossip," she scoffed weakly. Ethan snatched the papers, scanning them quickly before looking at his wife. "Clara, did you know about this?" She shook her head violently. "No, I swear I didn't know my mother did that." Ruth grabbed the papers and tore them apart. "It's all fabricated." Evelyn stood, her eyes calm. "You can tear the papers, but you can't erase the truth. I've been silent long enough. I endured to keep peace, to keep anyone from being hurt. But they never wanted peace. They only wanted what I had. She stepped to the center of the room, standing tall. I once taught Clara that kindness is not something for others to trample on. Today I'll prove it. Clara clutched Lily, trembling. Mom, I'm sorry I got caught up in this. I was afraid of losing Ethan, afraid you'd hate me. Evelyn walked closer and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I don't hate you. I only grieve that you forgot where you came from. Her voice deepened. Tomorrow, when the lawyer files the case, everything will be public. No one can hide anymore. If you want to save your family, tell the truth. Ethan stayed silent for a long time, then turned to Ruth, his voice shaking. Mother, I'm sorry, but I can't defend you anymore. This is wrong. Mrs. Hart is the true owner. Ruth spun around, her eyes blazing. What are you doing? You're my son, and I'm also her son-in-law, Ethan snapped. You've crossed the line. The room erupted. Ruth hurled the flower basket to the floor, petals scattering everywhere. You're all betraying me, all of you, she screamed, storming upstairs, the sound of the slamming door echoing through the house. Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing as she held Lily close. Evelyn looked at her daughter, eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. Tomorrow, everything changes. You have a choice to stand with the truth or let them drag you down further. Clara choked out through her tears. Mom, I want to make it right. I just don't know where to start. Evelyn gently brushed her hair back. Start with an apology and with action. I don't want them to leave out of anger. I want you to understand the value of honesty. That afternoon, David and Evelyn left the house. On the road, he said softly, You did the right thing, but this will spread across town. People will talk. Evelyn looked out the window where the sky was breaking into light. Let them talk. At least they'll be talking about a mother who refused to bow her head. When the car stopped in front of the inn, the wind carried the scent of ripe apples from a nearby orchard. Evelyn remained seated for a moment, her hand resting on the folder. Tomorrow, David, she said, we won't just go to court. I'll make sure the whole town sees the truth. David nodded, admiration flickering in his eyes. You might be the strongest woman I've ever met. Evelyn smiled faintly. No, I'm just someone who's endured too long. And when someone endures for too long, they stop being afraid of anything. She opened the door and stepped out. The afternoon light fell across her face, tracing every line, yet illuminating the fierce brightness in her eyes. In those eyes, there was no longer the pain of the night she was cast out, but the steel of a woman ready to claim justice. She walked up the steps and turned back toward the narrow road leading to her old home. Each step echoed in her chest like the beating drums before a storm. And Evelyn knew when that storm finally came, no one in that house would be able to pretend they didn't hear the thunder bearing her name. The next morning, the Vermont sky was a clear, soft blue. Gentle sunlight streamed through the inn's window, falling across Evelyn's face, calm and alert in its quiet composure. She had risen early, her hair neatly brushed a white blouse under a moss-green cardigan, her posture both stern and serene. When David arrived, she was already seated in the lobby with a neatly arranged folder before her. He gave a small nod. Ready? Evelyn replied evenly. We're not waiting another minute. The road back to the familiar house felt endless. Golden leaves blanketed the ground on both sides, and the breeze stirred them up like old memories resurfacing. When the car stopped at the gate, Evelyn saw a small crowd gathered in front of the house, neighbors, and familiar faces from town. Martha, old Peter, and Naomi, the young reporter. News of the lawsuit had spread like wildfire. Martha stepped forward and gently took Evelyn's hand. We're not here to watch a spectacle. We're here to stand witness to the truth. Evelyn smiled a rare, genuine smile after so many tense days. "Thank you, my friends. Today I'm not fighting alone." She and David entered the yard. At the door, Ruth was waiting, draped in a luxurious fur coat chin, raised her eyes defiant. Beside her stood Ethan and Clara, both looking exhausted and silent. The air felt heavy, so thick it seemed even the wind hesitated. Ruth stepped forward, her voice shrill. "What now, Evelyn? Do you really think this circus will make you look noble? The whole town will laugh at you." Evelyn met her gaze, calm and steady. "Good, let them laugh. But not at me. They'll laugh because someone finally dared to expose a lie." David opened his briefcase and drew out a large envelope, the official notice from the Windham County Court. His voice was clear and deliberate as he read Mrs. Evelyn Hart, the sole legal owner of the property at 72 Apple Creek Road, hereby file suit for fraud and unlawful occupation of said property. As he finished, Ruth burst into a hollow, brittle laugh. "You think the court will believe you? You signed the paper yourself. It was notarized. You've got no claim here anymore." Evelyn reached calmly into her bag and took out an old stack of photographs. She held them up for everyone to see, Jonathan holding a hammer, little Clara running through the yard, and Evelyn herself standing amid the apple trees. "You say I have no claim. The man in these photos laid every brick of this home. He left it all to me, and he left me something you could never have honor." Ruth froze her smile, stiffening into silence. Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Mother, stop. That's enough." But Ruth wouldn't listen. She lunged forward, snatching the photos and throwing them to the ground. "Honor. Honor doesn't feed anyone. What I need is this house, and I'm not leaving it." Evelyn didn't flinch her gaze, cutting like glass. "You don't need it, you crave it." Then she turned to her daughter. "And you, Clara, how long do you plan to live under a roof built on lies?" Clara's voice broke. "I'm so tired, Mom. I just want peace. Peace doesn't come from silence in the face of wrong," Evelyn said slowly, each word deliberate. "If you want real peace, start by speaking the truth." Clara was silent for a long moment. Everyone held their breath. Ruth stepped closer, gripping her daughter-in-law's shoulder. "Don't forget who raised your husband, who gave you this home." Clara brushed her hand away, her voice trembling but firm. "I haven't forgotten, but I also haven't forgotten who gave me life." The words struck like thunder at noon. Ruth stood frozen. Ethan bowed his head. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was gentle. "Good girl. You finally remember who you are." David nodded and unfolded another set of papers. "Mrs. Ruth, from this moment, this property is under temporary control of Mrs. Hart pending final judgment. If you refuse to vacate within 24 hours, the police will intervene." Ruth's face turned pale as she tried to compose herself. "I'll countersue. I'll prove she forged her own signature." David replied crisply, "You're welcome to try, but I doubt the video recording from the notary's office will lie." Evelyn turned toward the neighbors by the gate. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. I never wanted to turn my family into gossip, but I have no other choice." Martha stepped forward and spoke clearly. "Evelyn, you have nothing to apologize for. You're doing what's right. If mothers keep silent, no one will ever know where the line should be." Her words made many nod in agreement. Ruth looked around, realizing that every gaze was on Evelyn and none were on her. Her jaw tightened. "You'll all regret this," she hissed, then turned sharply and stormed inside. The heavy door slammed shut, echoing through the stillness. Ethan approached Evelyn and lowered his head. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let this go too far. I never imagined my mother would do this." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her tone soft but firm. "The mistake isn't in trusting people. The mistake is staying silent once you know you've been wronged." Little Lily ran forward, then wrapping her arms around Evelyn's leg. "Grandma, don't be sad." Evelyn knelt and hugged the child tightly. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just reclaiming the home where you'll grow up surrounded by truth." The child's innocent eyes blinked up at her, curious and pure. In that moment, Evelyn saw her younger self, trusting, hopeful, unaware of how cruel the world could be. When the crowd dispersed, Evelyn remained on the porch looking through the window. She caught a glimpse of Ruth's shadow inside, packing her belongings. The late autumn wind swept through the yard carrying the scent of wild chrysanthemums and the distant toll of a church bell. Evelyn whispered softly, "Jonathan, do you see justice still lives here after all?" As the afternoon sun dipped low, golden light washed over the garden. Clara sat on the stone bench, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea her mother had made. "Mom, I'm truly sorry. I let fear cloud my judgment. I was afraid Ethan would lose his job, afraid my mother-in-law would hate me, afraid everything would fall apart. But I didn't realize that fear itself destroyed everything." Evelyn touched her daughter's hand gently. "No one is immune to fear, Clara. What matters is whether you face it and make it right." Clara nodded, tears falling onto her mother's hand. "I'll testify. I'll tell the court you never meant to give away the house. I promise." Evelyn smiled, her eyes kind but weary. "I don't need promises. I just need you to remember this lesson for life. When you stay silent in the face of wrong, you become part of it." The evening grew colder as the wind slipped through the window frame. David approached, holding the finalized paperwork. "I'll file everything tonight. That way they won't have time to twist anything by morning." Evelyn nodded, her gaze drifting toward the apple orchard. Between the trembling trees, she could almost see Jonathan standing there, smiling gently. "You did it," he seemed to say. Evelyn closed her eyes, a deep, peaceful calm rising within her. That night, before leaving the house, she paused at the doorway, looking around one last time. The house still stood, but it no longer felt the same. Perhaps she would repaint the walls, rearrange the rooms, replant the orchard, but one thing she knew for certain this time: no one would ever drive her away again. No one. That night, Evelyn returned to the inn, but this time she didn't feel empty. The wound in her heart was still there, yet in place of pain was a quiet certainty she had done the right thing. Sitting by the window, she watched the pale moonlight fall across the court papers spread on the table. Outside, the wind rustled through the apple trees, sounding like Jonathan's whisper from years ago. "You've stood up again, Evelyn." She closed her eyes, letting the memories flow, his calloused hands, lifting each brick, the pride in his eyes, when their first home was finished, and his promise that no one will ever take this house away from you. The next morning came with a gentle knock on the door. Martha, her old neighbor, stood outside holding a basket of warm pastries. "I heard you've won the preliminary ruling," Martha said with a smile. "The whole town's talking about you. People are saying they've never seen anyone brave enough to stand up to their own children for the sake of justice." Evelyn chuckled softly. "I'm not standing against anyone, Martha. I'm standing against silence." Martha pulled out a chair and sat down. "You know, Naomi, the young reporter, is thinking of writing about you. She says it's a story about a mother who refused to be erased from her own life." Evelyn paused for a moment. "A newspaper story. I don't want any more noise." "It's not about attention," Martha said gently. "It's so other women know they're not alone." Evelyn grew quiet. Images of the mothers she once taught who had confessed to her about being forgotten by their children came flooding back. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "Some lessons must be heard, even if they hurt." That afternoon, Naomi arrived with a recorder, her youthful face serious and focused. Mrs. Evelyn, I want to tell your story with respect. I won't use your real name, just a mother from Vermont." Evelyn looked at the young woman, feeling a strange surge of pride. She had once taught Naomi to read when she was 8 years old, and now her former student was helping her find her voice. "All right," she said. "If my story can help someone else stand up, then write it." The interview lasted over an hour. Evelyn recounted everything from the moment she was told to leave her house to the day she signed the eviction papers. When she reached the part where Clara cried and admitted her mistake, Evelyn's voice softened. "No victory ever feels joyful when it comes at the cost of your child's tears," she said. "But sometimes love cannot be an excuse for silence." Naomi wrote down every word, her eyes glistening. "I think a lot of people need to hear that, Mrs. Evelyn." That evening after Naomi left, Evelyn received a call. It was Ethan. His voice was low and rough, carrying a hint of defeat. "Mom Ruth moved out. She's gone to New York to stay with my uncle. And Clara, she hasn't spoken all day. She hasn't eaten anything." Evelyn closed her eyes and sighed. "Son, sometimes silence is how people punish themselves. But I believe she'll be fine as long as you stay by her side." Ethan was quiet for a moment before he said softly, "I owe you a thank you. If you hadn't done what you did, I'd never have realized how strong you really are." Evelyn smiled through tears. "Thank you is enough, son. Just remember, this protect the ones you love, but never let anyone sacrifice their dignity just to keep the peace." The next day, Naomi's article appeared in the town newspaper. The title was simple, "The House of Resolve." It told the story of a woman who stood up against injustice within her own family. In the small town, everyone read it. Some stayed silent, some sent flowers, some merely shook their heads, but no one dared say Evelyn was wrong. The cafe at the end of the street pinned the article to its wall. When Evelyn walked in, the young barista smiled. "You're the woman from the article, right?" "My mom read it," she said. "You're so brave." Evelyn smiled and nodded her thanks. That afternoon, Clara appeared at the inn. She was wearing her mother's old sweater, her face pale but her eyes steady. When the door opened, she fell to her knees. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know words aren't enough, but I can't bear it anymore. I don't want you to think I'm a traitor." Evelyn gasped and hurried to pull her up. "Stand up, sweetheart. I don't need you to kneel. I just need you to understand." Clara sobbed. "I do understand now. I let others control me. I forgot that kindness, without limits, becomes a chain." The two of them sat together, the small room still carrying the warm scent of Martha's pastries. Evelyn told Clara about Jonathan, about how he had believed in their family until his last breath. "Your father used to say a house is only wood and stone, but the people inside must give it a soul. When that soul is stained, even the walls will crack." Clara wiped her tears. "I cracked the walls, Mom. But I want to rebuild them one brick at a time." Evelyn placed her hand gently over hers. "As long as you mean it, I forgive you." That evening they walked together through the apple orchard behind the inn. Moonlight spilled through the branches, apples rolling gently across the grass. Clara spoke quietly. "Ethan wants to apologize to you. He knows now that you were only protecting what's right. He wants to bring Lily to see you this weekend." Evelyn looked at her daughter, her eyes softening. "I don't need an apology. I just want you to be truly happy, not a happiness built on fear." As the wind picked up and dry leaves swirled around their feet, Evelyn stopped and looked up at the starry sky. She whispered as if speaking to her late husband, Jonathan. "I didn't defeat anyone. I only conquered myself." Clara heard and smiled through her tears. "Mom, I think I finally understand. Happiness isn't avoiding conflict, it's having the courage to face it." The next morning, Martha and Naomi arrived with good news. The court had issued a temporary ruling the house would remain entirely under Evelyn's name until the final decision. The news spread across Maple Hollow. People talked about the woman who dared to rise amid betrayal, but this time no one mocked her. They simply said, "She's the keeper of dignity's flame." That afternoon when everyone left, Evelyn sat alone by the window. She opened a small notebook and wrote her first words. "In years, I once thought silence was love, but true love is the courage to say no." She closed the notebook and placed it beside Jonathan's photograph. Outside, the late sunlight poured over the apple orchard, tinting the sky a soft honey gold. In that moment, Evelyn knew her battle wasn't over, but for the first time in years, she felt peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't come from silence, but from reclaiming the right to be herself. 3 days later, the court issued an official notice confirming that the legal ownership of the house belonged to Evelyn Hart. The decision sent shockwaves through the entire town. Many people called to congratulate her. Some brought flowers, others stopped by just to shake her hand firmly before leaving quietly. Evelyn accepted it all with a gentle smile, but deep inside, she felt a profound exhaustion. The battle had ended on paper, but she knew the cracks within her family would not heal easily. That morning, she rose early, brewed a pot of jasmine tea, and sat on the porch. Golden sunlight spilled over the rows of apple trees, the morning dew glistening like glass beads on the leaves. She sat still, listening to the rustle of wind and birdsong, feeling as though the world had finally begun to breathe with her again. But when the phone rang, that calm dissolved. The call was from Naomi. "Mrs. Evelyn, I just received news. Someone sent an anonymous letter to the court accusing you of forging your signature and fabricating evidence." Evelyn stood abruptly. "Fabricating evidence? Impossible. I think it's someone from Ruth's side." "She might not be done yet," Naomi said quickly. "The court will recheck the files, but they'll need your cooperation. Can you provide all original documents, of course?" "I still have everything," Evelyn replied, her voice steady but firm. "If they want to play dirty, I'll make them regret underestimating me again." She immediately called David. He arrived within an hour, his face stern. "I just heard. Don't worry, this is their final, desperate move. But we need to be careful. I'll have all the documents recertified by the notary." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes resolute. "David, I'm not afraid of the court. I'm only afraid that this hatred will never end." He sighed. "Hatred always runs out eventually, but if no one stands up, the wrong will always believe they're right." That afternoon, after David left, Evelyn found a small envelope on her doorstep. There was no sender listed. She opened it to find shaky but familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry. You were right. But sometimes the truth is cruel." She read it over and over and recognized Clara's handwriting. Her heart ached with both pain and compassion. Clara was trapped between two worlds, between her mother and her husband, between truth and loyalty. Evelyn placed the letter beside Jonathan's photo frame. "She's learning her own lesson," she whispered. That evening, as she was clearing the table, the doorbell rang. It was Ethan holding Lily in his arms. He looked worn out, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes heavy as if from a sleepless night. "Mom," he said softly, "Clara's at the hospital with Ruth. She had a heart episode." Evelyn froze, then nodded slightly. "Come in." Ethan set the child on a chair. Lily ran to her grandmother, hugging her legs. "Grandma, is Grandma Ruth sick?" Evelyn stroked her hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart, but she'll be all right. Sometimes older people just need time to realize they can't control everything." Ethan sat down, his fingers intertwined. "I know I can't ask you to forgive me yet, but I want you to know I see it all now. I read the messages my mother sent Clara. I realized she never wanted to stop. She just wanted to win." Evelyn looked at him calmly. "No one wins in something like this, Ethan. When trust is broken, everyone loses. He lowered his head, eyes red. I just want Clara to be at peace. I want Lily to grow up in a home without lies. Evelyn took his hand. If you're sincere, start by being honest with yourself. The next day, Naomi returned with a sealed envelope. Good news, Mrs. Evelyn. The court's finished reviewing the case. All documents are valid, the signature is authentic, and nothing was forged. The sender of the anonymous letter has been identified. It was Ruth. Evelyn was silent for a few seconds, then exhaled deeply. I guessed as much. She doesn't realize that the more she tries to pull me down, the stronger I stand. Naomi smiled, admiration shining in her eyes. Someone should write a book about you, you know. A mother thrown out of her own home who fought to reclaim everything. Evelyn shook her head, smiling faintly. If they write it, let it not just be about me. Let it be about all the women who refuse to disappear from their own lives. That afternoon, Clara called. Her voice was weak. Mom, I'm at the hospital with mother-in-law. She's better now. She said she wants to see you. Evelyn paused. See me? Yes, she said she wants to talk one last time. Evelyn was silent for a few seconds. All right, I'll come. When she arrived, Ruth was lying in bed, her face pale but her eyes still carrying that trace of pride. Clara sat beside her silent. Ethan stood near the door. As Evelyn approached, Ruth looked up, her lips trembling. You came. I thought you'd be pleased to see me like this. Evelyn answered calmly. I didn't come to feel pleased or vindicated. I came for Clara. Ruth gave a faint, bitter laugh. You're always so noble. But you won, didn't you? Are you happy now? Evelyn sat down beside her bed. No one's happy watching someone else fall. But at least I can look my daughter in the eyes without shame. Ruth turned away. After a long pause, she spoke weakly. Maybe I was wrong. I thought if I stopped controlling, I'd lose everything. But the more I tried to hold on, the more I lost. Evelyn looked at her gently. It's not too late to fix that. Start by letting your children live their own lives. Ruth closed her eyes, exhausted. Clara leaned forward, holding her mother-in-law's hand. Rest now, Mom. Everything will be all right. Evelyn stood and looked at the two women, one old, one young, and for a brief moment her heart felt lighter. Perhaps true closure wasn't about victory, but about the moment resentment finally stopped. As she left the hospital, the night wind swept strongly through the streets. Evelyn looked up at the sky where the stars shimmered like scattered embers. She smiled a tired but genuine smile. On her way home, her phone buzzed with a new message from Clara. Thank you, Mom. I'm starting to understand. Sometimes, to keep a home standing, you have to be willing to let it fall. Evelyn read the message and nodded softly. She understood that though the road ahead was still long, Clara had taken her first real step away from the shadows of dependency toward the light of truth, and that was the real victory. That night, Evelyn lay in bed, watching the moonlight spread across the wall. For the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. No more dreams of slamming doors, no more echoes of the words, "Get out of this house," only the whisper of the wind and the faint scent of ripe apples in the air. She knew that tomorrow there would still be conversations to have, wounds still healing, but deep down, she also knew the storm had passed. And when the storm passes, one can finally hear the sound of their own heartbeat, the strongest sound in every battle ever fought. 2 weeks later, the air in Maple Hollow felt entirely different. Autumn had arrived at last, the apple orchard behind Evelyn's house, glowing red, the breeze carrying the scent of ripe fruit mixed with fallen leaves, gentle bittersweet. She woke early, brewed tea, opened the window, and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. After everything, the house was now unusually quiet. No more arguments, no footsteps of strangers echoing down the hallway. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the warmth of a peaceful morning. That day's town newspaper ran a short article, "Court confirms legal ownership of Maple Hollow home to retired teacher, ending a family dispute that drew public attention." Below it was a note from Naomi Justice. Doesn't always come quickly, but it always comes to those brave enough to wait. Evelyn folded the paper, her gaze distant. She didn't need praise, only the comfort of knowing that the truth was recorded. So one day Lily could read it and understand that her grandmother had fought to keep not only a house, but her dignity. Just then the sound of a car stopped at the gate. Ethan stepped out carrying a basket of pastries and a bottle of milk. Little Lily ran after him, her pigtails bouncing, her face lit with joy. "Grandma," she shouted, rushing forward to hug Evelyn's legs, the smell of milk and apples blending into something familiar. Evelyn bent down, held her tightly, and listened to the quick beat of the child's heart. "I've missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too. Mom said I could come play. She said your pies are better than the bakery's." Ethan stood at the doorway looking slightly uneasy. "Clara didn't come?" Evelyn asked softly. He nodded. "She's still at the hospital with her mother. Ruth's gotten weaker, but she's changed. She told me to bring you an apology." Evelyn paused. "An apology?" "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "She said if she could start over, she wouldn't let her pride destroy the family." Evelyn sighed and turned toward the window where sunlight poured over the apple trees. Sometimes people only learn their lesson when there's nothing left to lose. Ethan fell silent, his eyes glistening. "Mom, I really want to thank you. I know I've made mistakes. I'll never forget the sight of you standing at that door with the court papers in your hand, still looking at me without hatred." Evelyn placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Ethan, you're a good husband and a good father. You just forgot that silence can kill love, too. Teach Lily to speak up when something isn't right, even if it's with someone she loves." Ethan nodded, his voice thick. "I promise." Later that afternoon, Clara returned. She stepped onto the porch, her expression hesitant, but no longer avoiding her mother's gaze. When she saw Evelyn and Lily sitting together at the kitchen table, she stood still for a long time. Evelyn said nothing, just tilted her head slightly. Clara walked closer and placed a small pouch on the table. "Mother-in-law sent this for you. It's her wooden hairpin. She said she wants you to keep it as thanks for not abandoning her when she fell ill." Evelyn opened the pouch and looked at the delicately carved piece of wood, and a strange sense of compassion rose in her chest. Perhaps in the end, we're all just mothers trying to hold on to our children the wrong way. Clara nodded, eyes brimming with tears. That afternoon, 3 generations sat together beneath the apple trees. Lily gathered fallen fruit, Ethan tended the fire to bake pies, and Clara helped her mother knead the dough. They didn't speak much, but the air between them had changed. No longer tense or cautious, only gentle pauses and quiet glances filled with understanding. When the pies were done, the scent of butter and apples filled the yard. Evelyn cut the first slice and handed it to her daughter. "Taste it. See if it's like when you were little." Clara took a bite, tears spilling down as the old flavor returned. "It's exactly like the ones you made when I was 10. Evelyn smiled, resting her hand on Clara's. "Then that's good. Maybe we've gone all the way around just to return to where we truly belong." That evening, as Ethan and Clara prepared to leave, Lily ran to hug her grandmother tightly. "Grandma, can I come again tomorrow?" Evelyn bent down, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You can come whenever you want. This house will always have a place for you." The child smiled, her eyes shining like early autumn stars. When the car disappeared around the bend, Evelyn went back inside. The small house was warm, the soft yellow light glowing against the wall where Jonathan's photo hung. She stood there for a long time, then whispered, "You see, my love, everything has finally found its place again. Not perfect, but real." Outside, the autumn wind swept through the orchard, rustling the last apples of the season. Evelyn closed the door gently, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She understood that life would never be completely peaceful. There would still be hard days and old memories. But now, within the home, she had defended with all her courage. She had found something far more precious than victory, the peace within herself, and the quiet faith that from ruins one can always begin again as long as there is love and forgiveness. One late October morning, Maple Hollow was wrapped in a white mist that looked like smoke. Evelyn brewed her tea, opened the window to the soft morning light, and listened to the sparrows chirping on the roof. 6 months ago, this house had been a battlefield. Now it was the most peaceful place in town. The phone rang and Clara's gentle voice came through. "Mom, Ethan, Lily, and I want to come over for lunch. Would that bother you?" Evelyn smiled. "Never. This house is ours." When they arrived, Lily ran straight to the apple orchard. Ethan carried a basket of pastries, and Clara held a bundle of wildflowers. The atmosphere was simple, but warm. Ethan helped set the table, and Clara joined her mother in the kitchen. As they mixed dough together, Clara said softly, "Mom Ruth moved to Florida. She wants to start over. Before she left, she asked me to thank you for teaching her a late lesson that love doesn't mean possession." Evelyn paused, nodded gently. "That's something everyone has to learn, my dear, even me." At noon, the four of them ate lunch beneath the apple tree. Lily giggled, her hands covered in flour, while Ethan looked at his wife and mother with peaceful eyes. There were no cracks left in their conversation, only laughter and light. After the meal, they cleaned up together, and Evelyn led her granddaughter into the garden. The little girl picked up a fallen apple and held it out. "Grandma, this one looks bad, but it's still sweet." Evelyn laughed and hugged her. "That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes the things that seem broken are the ones most precious, just like the love in our family." As afternoon faded, the breeze stirred the branches, scattering a few late apple blossoms into Evelyn's silver hair. She watched her daughter smiling, her son-in-law quietly stacking chairs, and her granddaughter chasing butterflies through the grass. Everything moved slowly, peacefully. In her heart, there was no longer a heavy stone of resentment, only gratitude. When Clara was ready to leave, she hugged her mother tightly. "Mom, I want to host a small gathering in the spring. Invite everyone and tell them that everything we have now is because you were brave enough to say no." Evelyn smiled and brushed her daughter's hair. "It's not because I dared to say no, but because you dared to listen." As they drove away, the sunset bathed the apple orchard in a golden honey hue. Evelyn stood on the porch, the wind weaving through her gray hair, her gaze distant but serene. At last she understood that a mother's true strength doesn't lie in holding on to everything, but in knowing when to let go, so her children can learn to stand on their own, and so love can return to its purest form. And when the door closed behind her, the little house was filled with only two sounds, the gentle ticking of the clock and the quiet rhythm of peace, the peace she had spent a lifetime fighting to reclaim. The following spring, Maple Hollow was draped in a soft shade of green. Evelyn's apple orchard bloomed white, its fragrance filling the air. Today was the day Clara held the small gathering she had promised. Neighbors, friends, and those who had witnessed their story came bringing flowers, pastries, and warm, genuine smiles. On the table, Naomi placed the latest newspaper with an article titled, "When a Mother Says No and Finds Herself Again." Evelyn read it and smiled faintly. There were no more tears, only a quiet pride. Lily ran up holding an apple blossom. "Grandma Mom says, I'm just like you, strong and kind." Evelyn bent down and hugged her. Then I must have done something right. Sunlight streamed through the branches, catching on her silver hair like strands of gold. Amid the laughter and the music, Evelyn looked up and whispered softly to the breeze, Jonathan, "My love, we kept the house. We kept the family." Then she turned to the crowd, her eyes shining like sunlight. "If you're hearing this story," she said, her voice warm and steady, "tell it again. Share it with someone who needs to know it's time to say enough.